Welcome to Can Art Save Us, the podcast exploring how the arts can strengthen and even transform our mental, societal and democratic health. I talk with diverse award-winning artists about how the arts cultivate courage and curiosity and why we need these qualities to confront today's global epidemics of mental illness, loneliness, polarisation of our communities and even worldwide conflict. Be part of this national and international conversation. Join us to discover how the arts can really help you. After 9 seasons, 65 episodes and more than 6,000 downloads, I'm very grateful that this independent podcast has earned the trust of listeners and artists around the world. Thank you to every guest and listener, because this reach has been built entirely through organic growth and without a paid PR machine. I'm now reliably informed that the series is placed well ahead of the majority of new podcasts and with continued growth. So, thank you. To mark this shared achievement, I wanted to close 2025 with something special, a feature on an arts organisation that shares and embodies the values this series supports. The Arts House in Wakefield, also known as the House That Art Built, is a leading example of what is possible, even in the toughest economic climate. This small but long-established arts charity remains steadfast in its mission to champion diversity, inclusion, and transformative change. This isn't about tokenism, it's core to everything they do. Together in this episode, we'll explore how the arts can help us think more deeply, feel more fully, and imagine more generously. The Art House demonstrates what we should all be able to expect when it comes to participating in the arts and to discover multiple benefits that can help shape a better world to live in. I'm very pleased to welcome Damon Jackson Waldock, the Co-Executive Director at the Art House. Hello, Damon, and welcome to Can Art Save Us?
Hello, thank you for having me. And what an introduction that was to the House.
Well, it's very deserved. So thank you for making the time. I really appreciate how busy you all are. Damon, can you share what your pathway to becoming the co-executive director at the Art House was and what the barriers were that you personally faced to work in the arts?
It's quite nice to talk about this part of what I do and how I got here, because it does really feed into what I believe as a curator and as a executive director. And actually, the more I think back to the past, it's had a massive impact on how we program and what we do. So yeah, I grew up in Sheffield. I came from a single parent family. Now looking back, we were quite poor, although I never felt poor, but we were. My mum was long-term unemployment. And so kind of the idea of going to university didn't really come up straight away, but I was kind of first of the family to go to university. I ended up staying in Sheffield just because I couldn't afford to move away. So I studied fine art and contemporary cultures there after college. I spent 3 amazing years in art school, which is, I think, one of the most incredible places people can go, but kind of coming out not knowing what to do with that, knowing I didn't want to be an artist, but was creative and wanted to work with other creatives in some way. So yeah, coming out of university was feeling a bit lost. It took me a few years to get on some kind of path. But I always knew museums was the thing for me. Galleries and museums was the thing for me, probably because, again, looking back at my upbringing, every weekend it felt like we were at our local museum and art gallery at the time they were combined. So we'd always go and visit there every weekend. And thinking about that was probably because it was free, and, access to art is, and, free access to art is something that I'm still passionate about. It was warm, we were out and, there was activities to do. So it probably had a significant impact on what I wanted to do. So that's, at that point, it was like, I want to work in the arts, but didn't know how to and what was for me, as this kind of working class kid. My dream was to work as a gallery invigilator. I mean, just to kind of sit with the art and be with the art and look after it was something that I aspired to do. And it probably is an amazing job, but that's because I didn't know there was anything above that for people like me at the time. So I felt incredibly lucky when a few years later, after taking some time out to care for a sibling with disabilities, I got the opportunity to apply for a scheme which was called Diversify, which had been running for 10 years. And it was very much trying to break the kind of the glass ceiling of the art world and who works in it. And it was in its final year. And whereas previous years was very much around kind of getting more black and brown creatives into leadership roles in the arts, the final year was more extended out to support those from low socio-economic backgrounds and queer stories and experiences, and trying to diversify what the Diversify scheme was all about. And I was lucky enough to whittle down from 200 people to get a workplace training at the Yorkshire Sculpture Park back in 2010.
Oh, amazing.
So that's how my pathway into the arts began. So learning on the job. There was an option to do a kind of an MA curation. I opted for 12 months work-based training, and it was the best thing I ever did. And over the years, learned a lot and managed to get a full-time job at the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, worked there for 11 years before deciding to move on from a large institution and work somewhere that was a bit more smaller, a bit more grassroots, and actually aligned with what I wanted to do as a curator. So that's how I came to work at the Art House.
Yeah, it's such an interesting and important journey to hear about. You know, there's three really significant turning points or door openers. One is the Free Museum that you could go to as a child, which must have been such an enormous help to your mum, being able to provide activities that weren't economically constrained in a space where there was as much education as well as entertainment. The fact that you went to university, and as you said, the first in your family, is so significant because that's a culture shock, if you like, a positive culture shock within a family, but also perhaps a culture shock for you as a lone role model in that family. And then, of course, this scheme, Diversify, is such an important door opener, another form of civic empowerment. You know, it enabled you an opportunity. So if we took any of those things away, where might you be now?
I don't know. I'd like to think I'd still be here because I'd be ambitious enough to yeah. But yeah, you're right, because you know there's not much opportunities like that you know I believe we might be in a worse time now than we were back in 2010 when the Diversify scheme had been running for 10 years and trying to achieve what it wanted to achieve. I think I read something in 2024 that said actually people that work in the arts are less, it's less diverse than it's ever been. That's because of funding cuts and lack of opportunity. Those schemes don't run. Many museums that I've grown up with in Yorkshire and wider are now charged for, hard to get to. So yeah, maybe I would be in a completely different job.
Yeah, it gives you a massive appreciation, doesn't it? That lived experience of how barriers can change. And this is, of course, what you all do brilliantly well at the Art House, the space that you create, the inclusivity, the diversity. It's clearly core to everything you do. I wondered if we could talk about two particular initiatives that have really stood out. And the first one is the Well Placed initiative, a response to social and economic deprivation in communities. I wondered if you could share with the listeners how the arts and Well Placed action is creating positive social change.
Yeah, so Well Placed is kind of a new initiative for us, but it began a few years back in Wakefield. The Art House would kind of work with units in the local shopping centre, the Riding Shopping Centre, to kind of tackle the many empty units that were happening. The high streets not doing really well right now, and times have changed for the high streets. We need to offer something more than just shops. We need to offer an experience. Also in Wakefield, there's a huge demand for access to studio spaces and spaces to do creative things and exhibitions. The Art House has a huge waiting list of creatives that want to work here for various reasons, because of its access, but also because Wakefield is becoming quite really known for the kind of the creative output. So the Art House kind of came up with this idea and this partnership really because we're always constantly thinking about what is a role of an art gallery beyond just having white cube space. And this is one of the areas that we were kind of thinking that an art gallery could support. We could be activators for helping regeneration and for placemaking and for creativity to thrive. And it adds to kind of our civic role as an art gallery to try and empower lots of groups, other artists, non-profits, social enterprises to come together and to reignite these empty spaces. So that's something that the Art House began doing in Wakefield, the Makey Wakey, and then over the years we've developed that program to become Well Placed, which now sees the kind of the regeneration of these empty spaces in Wakefield, in Salford. We're moving out to Derby, to Hull. So it's growing. It's quite an exciting thing that we're really focusing on right now. We've seen it worked really well in Wakefield, and we can see how it can help make change in other towns and cities, and what it does when you bring all of these people together, the community, artists, creatives, all together, and what it can do for the towns and cities.
Yeah, and seeing that growth and connection is such great testimony to positive change. And significantly, in 2017, the Art House became the UK's first ever studio of sanctuary. And I'm really interested in if you could share with us about how the Art House helps people seeking asylum and refugees fleeing persecution, war or violence. Could you explain to us that role and how this has also developed into the Sanctuary Network?
It was definitely one of the things that really drew me to wanting to work here, actually. So at the time, in 2017, there was a large community being placed in Wakefield. It has quite a large initial accommodation centre for people based temporarily. And the idea is that when people are placed in these initial accommodation centres, they'd only be there for a few weeks before getting relocated. With changes to the system, it's not happening like that. People are based there for 12 months, 2 years. And there's not much to do. And we found that a lot of the communities were coming into the Art House or being signposted to the Art House as a kind of a warm, welcoming space. Takes me back to that idea of me going to a warm, welcome space, when I was a child. And at the time in 2017, we were noticing language was a huge barrier, but we would offer creative activities and creative health and wellbeing activities for free, and people were attending them. And then through the kind of the shared language of art and creativity, it kind of came out that some people using those workshops were actually artists or designers or tailors in their own country. And this idea was born, through various different things we were doing. There was artists wanting to explore projects, and an artist set up a welcome space in the gallery for people in the asylum process. And from all of that, was born this idea that maybe we should be supporting access for people that were in the asylum process that may have been a creative in their home country that had left their portfolios behind, that left their networks behind, and trying to navigate this very difficult system. On top of that, because they were artists or designers, trying to navigate the art world and its systems. And so the Studio Sanctuary was born in terms of offering free studio spaces. We have 45 studios here. Most of them are rented out for artists, designers and creators, but some of them we give them out as bursary studios for people in the asylum process. And that's how it began, really, offering support, professional development, materials budget to help artists rebuild their portfolios that they've left behind. So that's how it began in 2017. There's been around 8 creatives and artists that we supported through the Studio Sanctuary. Some artists have left the Art House now and gone on to set up studios in Yorkshire and are doing very well and being very successful in the art world and are now being collected by museums and galleries. We have a tailor that now has one of the units in Well Placed in Makey Wakey in Wakefield, who's now running his own tailoring business. And these are just really important and powerful stories, really, of kind of supporting with a little bit of access, a little bit of pastoral care, a little bit of friendship and welcome, and then what these artists and creators go on to do. And then that's going to then extend out to the community. So now we run anywhere between 1 and 3 free workshops a week for different creative activities for the community. Around 3,000 people annually come through the kind of the creative side of that. So that's people in the asylum seeking community accessing free art activities or just a cup of tea and a conversation. And then that's also then grown into something which is now a gallery of sanctuary status that we have.
Yeah, it's really incredible, the positive impact of connection and enabling connection. And I'll just share for context with listeners, particularly international listeners, that the Refugee Council note that the UK is home to approximately 1% of the 27.1 million refugees, people forcibly displaced across the world. And 41% of displaced people across the world are in fact children. It's a global crisis, and clearly the Art House is trying to respond very much with your human-centred approach. What positive impact have you witnessed through Studio Sanctuary in terms of perhaps unexpected outcomes with local people and those connections with people seeking asylum and refugees?
I think everything we try and do here is about that idea of what is our role as an art gallery today. Like, art galleries have evolved so much, and there's services are being cut in towns and cities and for councils' lack of funding. So galleries are kind of picking up things that they may have not necessarily done many years ago. I think galleries and museums have always had an engagement program, but really, what is that civic role now of what is our anchor point? What are we doing in our communities, as well as supporting artists, as well as putting on exhibitions, as well as bringing in visitors to see the works? So this idea that, not just for those in the asylum process, but for anybody that faces barriers, to be a welcoming, warm space is really important. And to try and create community cohesion between people that may not necessarily come together is so important right now, more so than ever before. And I remember last year when there was rioting and anti-immigration riots, let's call them what they are, have always happened, and for many years, but they kind of came to light again last summer. And at the time, these riots were happening in hotels and other accommodation centres all around different northern towns and cities. And at the time, Wakefield didn't have that, and the Art House was preparing for something bad to happen potentially, because we have signs up saying we welcome everyone, we welcome refugees, and it didn't happen in Wakefield. And it did get us thinking about, like, what is Wakefield, what's special around it? And is it because we are trying to include lots of people in the kind of conversations in our art galleries and create cohesion together? You mentioned the Wakefield Sanctuary Network. That was something that the Art House founded 2.5 years ago now and continues to chair. And it was about bringing people together that work with those that are forced, displaced, exiled, or seeking sanctuary, to come together to have these meaningful conversations about what is our role in the city. And so, again, at the time, I was thinking this is uncommon for an art gallery to lead this, but there was an identified lack of people coming together around a table, different charities, different social enterprises that support those, coming together to see what is the need. And between us, I think it's really successful because we can talk about what people need, whether it's services, whether it's health, whether it's creative health, well-being, and access. And I think it coming together really is really impactful on the city to show that we are a welcoming, safe city. So the network is important. The Studio Sanctuary is important. Us being a gallery of sanctuary is important because we stage exhibitions that bring up these themes as well for visitors. So it's really important that we continue to do all of that.
Yeah, no, it's an incredible opportunity. It's the same as you being able to walk through the door of a free museum as a child. It's an opportunity that if it didn't exist, then transformative change is less likely to follow. And it's very clear from everything you're saying how humanity, or the human-centred approach taken at the Art House, is at the core of everything you do. And it also helps respond to misinformation, perhaps. And also, it's problematic, isn't it, how diverse groups of people are labelled, such as ethnic minority versus global majority, for example, or labels being assigned rather than self-identification. It's all part of a power imbalance. And I imagine this is something you're very conscious of at the Art House.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, going right back to the founding mission, the idea of the Art House wanting to create a purpose-built building for access and inclusion was so important. And it took them 15 years to finally get a piece of land and the funding to do it, because they didn't want to compromise with heritage buildings. And maybe they could have done it quicker by going down a direct disability arts funding route, but they didn't want that. It wasn't about labels or anything like that. It was about everyone being together and making art together. So at the time, it was wheelchair users and non-wheelchair users making together, but to do that, you have to have access and spaces for the wheelchair users. And that kind of remains the same. We're not a disability-led arts charity. We're about access and inclusion. So we support people facing poor mental health challenges. We support people with disabilities right through to supporting global majority, queer voices, those in the asylum process have had to seek sanctuary. It's really important that it becomes part of what we do and not add-ons or dip-ins and dip-outs. And it's really embedded in what we do. And it's not about tokenism and we jump in and out, or we don't just follow funding for certain projects, which can happen in the art world. Like funding increases for some groups and then it disappears. So it's really important that we try and sustain all of that. We constantly think about that a lot. And the more I'm learning from people, and even around this moment in time with lots of rioting going on around anti-immigration, is just like, again, this idea of what an art gallery is shifting and changing, and the public, the ones that are, conscious around supporting people and welcoming and think of humanity first before anything else, are looking to museums and galleries now to see what's your point of view on these things. And it's a difficult space, but people that are in certain groups, want true solidarity, and we want to stand in solidarity with people and be able to not be afraid to say, this is what we stand for and this is what we believe as a team. It's okay to say that we disagree with this or disagree with that, but it's really hard for an art gallery, especially a public funding gallery, to do that properly. And we are always looking to see how we can do that better. And I think a lot more visitors and a lot more people now are expecting that of galleries and museums. That's how it's evolved.
Yeah, it's a really significant point, the evolution of the role that galleries and the arts in general can have, particularly around social cohesion, societal health, as well as personal health, mental health. There's a really significant development of the role of the arts. And I wondered what you might say to anybody who felt intimidated by art settings. Often a typical reaction when it's not a usual part perhaps of your culture, or there may not be any immediate access. Art settings can be perceived as too academic or too posh, rather than personally relevant or helpful to their own lives.
Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly thinking about that question all the time within what we do and within what I want to be as a curator, and always say all the time that there is no such thing as hard to reach audiences. The galleries themselves are the hard to reach thing. If you don't think that space is for you, you're not going to step through the door. But why are people not stepping through the door? And also kind of to accept that, sometimes art galleries or funders and, things like that will say, come to an art gallery and you'll be cultured. And I'm always kind of saying, but whose culture are we talking about here? Like, it's really hard to navigate. I think the only things you can do is try and be as open and welcoming as possible. And you probably do that through engagement work to begin with, and kind of going out to work with people or bringing people in. But, also galleries have got a long way to go. You need your spaces to look and feel welcoming. I think when you step into the art house, you kind of almost feel like you're stepping into a homely cafe and there's lots of plants and it feels nice. You're not actually stepping into an intimidating gallery space. And I find it so hard as well, as someone that's worked in the arts for over 15 years, to step into some galleries and museums, and commercial galleries even more so. It's sort of an intimidating space. So how do you break that down? I don't have the full answers, but it's definitely one that we're constantly looking at. But also, I think representation in the galleries, who's making decisions, who's part of the team, what training people have, all of that is a huge part. And I think this idea that the arts is quite a diverse place to work in, I think it's a little bit of a myth. I think, there's still a lot of people that are not represented in leadership roles and decision-making roles. And, I think the Art House, we've just moved into a co-leadership model, which for us is really exciting because that's two people's ideas. We can work together, we can bounce off each other, but at the same time, we both come from working class backgrounds. It's female-led, and then it's queer-led, and then it's working class experience. And I think that's really important that we share that story because I think it helps break down some of those myths around who galleries are for and what they're for, and also what we're programming, the artists we're working with and what they want to, we've got to remember as well is we do all this great work and all this social impact work, which I think is great, but also fundamentally we're here to support artists with their careers, with making new artworks. So it's kind of getting all of that together and doing it for real meaningful reasons is I think how we can start to break it down. But I do think we've got a long way to go before people might start thinking, yeah, I could step foot in that art gallery. But there's so many barriers, access barriers, people that have got disabilities, we've got people that can't afford, entry fees. But I just think it's the art gallery that needs to lead that and steer that and think about how we can make that more accessible to lots of different people. And actually, I need to point out, it's okay for an art gallery to not meet everybody. Just because I feel really access and inclusion is really important for me. It's also, there's a space for all art galleries in the UK to cater for lots of different things, and it's great. But I think more partnership, more acknowledging being honest about what you don't offer is really important. And I think we don't do enough of that, saying like, I can't offer this, but we cater to this group, and working partnership together is really important. And I think that's one of the failures of the art world, is that we don't connect more, we don't co-create together, we don't collaborate. The art world is slightly behind with that. So, but there is a place for everything. But sometimes I think about being honest. Please don't have on the website, we are art for everybody. That needs to go. That slogan needs to disappear. We've got it in our website that says we believe art should be for everyone, but we realize it's not.
Yeah. It's a more honest statement because it needs to be more about collaboration and not competition, particularly after 2 decades of such severe and disproportionate cuts, including education. So there's a significant deprivation there for people's expectations and understanding around the arts and arts pathways. And it's also very much a need, as you were just saying, to examine staffing and governance as well as places and access, and are there enough places, and if there are they accessible? What do they look like? What do they feel like? But it's very much to the credit of the Art House in terms of demonstrating consistently what is possible despite not just constraints, but awareness of all of these very deep barriers. I really appreciate you taking the time to share such important insights today and your own personal story, Damon. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. No, I could talk about this for days, and it's lovely to talk to you about it.
I'm now delighted to welcome Amelia Barron, Curator and Programme Coordinator at the Art House. Amelia, welcome to Cannot Save Us.
Hi, it's great to be here, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Amelia, can you share what your pathway to becoming the curator and programme coordinator at the Art House was, and any personal barriers that you faced to work in the arts?
Yes, so my journey into the arts and further education was quite unconventional. I ended up spending quite a lot of time in hospital due to poor mental health during my teenage years, and it was the arts that actually brought me that cathartism and enabled me to use that as a tool for recovery. I then ended up going to Leeds Arts University to study fine art. And then after that, after I graduated, I ended up at the Art House as front of house. And it was from there really that I worked my way up. And here I am now, 5 years later, as a curator and programme coordinator. And I feel incredibly lucky to have had that opportunity.
And I remember, Amelia, when we spoke previously, you said, I didn't even know you could get jobs in the arts. Was that because your focus may have been on becoming an artist, or was it just lack of exposure to the kinds of roles that could exist?
I think it was the latter. So, yeah, lack of exposure. Growing up in Blackburn, we didn't really have that much culture going on in terms of contemporary art galleries. So I didn't know that you could be a curator or programme coordinator, and I didn't think you could be an artist either. I thought it was something that was merely hobbies or for those who maybe had those opportunities down in London. Yeah, it was very unconventional, let's say.
It's a really important point, though, that you made, because it's an example of civic empowerment, the fact that our perspectives and our expectations can actually be diversified. And it sounds like your entry into the art house is such a great example of the journeys that you create there. Previously, you've also spoken about how the art house fosters relationships that are human centered. And I wondered if you could tell us how that guides your work.
Of course. That's something that's really special to the art house is human-centered approach. Whether the artist is emerging or established, we treat them all the same, and we really give our time and energy to supporting the artist. For example, we've had Tonya, we've had Victoria. It's beautiful how we then foster these relationships and continue to support the artist as they move through their career as well. And it's just beautiful seeing how they blossom.
Yeah, and I'm actually really interested in touching on both of the artist names you mentioned, and also how risks may be involved in your role. So I recently spoke to Tonye Ekene after his solo exhibition with you. And for listeners, Tonye is recognised as one of the top 40 rising stars by the Royal Society of British Artists. And you can also hear an episode with Tonye in the series. But Amelia, Tonye notably referred to you and Damon, the co-executive director, as taking a chance on him after he didn't make a selection process. And I was really interested in if you could tell us about what that journey was with Tonye at the Art House.
Of course. So we work with the Royal Overseas League to offer a residency at the Art House each year. And Tonye applied for this, but unfortunately didn't make the final 2 selection. But after reading his application and seeing his work and just feeling that energy through the application, we wanted to offer him something. Although we couldn't pay for his time on this occasion, we wanted to get him to the art house, allow him to explore his printing process that he referred to in the application. And by doing this, we offered him a 2-week stay at in our building, where we also have flats, studio spaces, as well as maker spaces as well. Yeah, he really illuminated the place with just such beautiful energy. And yeah, the staff as well, just so happy to have him around. And he ended up becoming an integral part of the Art House family. And I think that's something that's worth celebrating as well, is that when an artist leaves, they don't fully leave. They'll always be part of the Art House family.
It was really clear talking to Tonye how happy his experience was at the Art House, and very clearly testimony to the human-centred approach that we've been talking about. And equally, I'm interested in Dr. Victoria Clare's recent exhibition, Sense of Sculpture, and that was billed as groundbreaking. And for listeners, Victoria now has 0% vision with only light perception. So, Amelia, how did the Art House embrace Victoria's work and change the visitor experience?
We were working with Victoria, who is an incredible artist. We wanted to offer our audiences something different. So with Victoria's exhibition, it was in complete pitch black and allowed the audience to feel the artwork, something that is not very often found within the art. And it was a really great opportunity to learn more about Victoria as an artist, but also to understand what those with visual impairments do go through as well. And that's what we really want to do at the Art House. We want to challenge norms. We want to challenge what the art world is, but we also want to do that with compassion. And this was just a really great example of how facing barriers as well as being creative can really benefit both audience and artist.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think importantly, this exhibition really showed how we can all experience things through senses and emotions, that there isn't only one way to look. And these experiences ought to be an integral and equal part of how we experience the arts. What came out of the feedback, Amelia, in terms of visitors that came to the exhibition?
Visitors felt deeply about the exhibition. We had a lot of positive feedback, just again challenging typical norms of what a gallery can and can't be. And for a lot of the audience, this was the first time that they had experienced something like this. We as well worked with a lot of different charities, as well as Wakefield District Site Aid, and we will continue to foster that relationship with those organisations to continue learning about how we can make the arts accessible to hopefully everybody.
Yeah, it is so important. And clearly, from my point of view, I see the Art House as such a leader in this. And would you think it's fair to say the Art House is more about courage over convention and relevance over rules?
Exactly. Again, we at the Art House, I think it's something really special as the majority of staff are also creatives. And I think this gives us a different view on how the arts can be accessible to the audience.
Yeah, because it's partly that lived experience, but that shared understanding of the barriers, the difficulties, or the pressures that artists can face.
Exactly. It's not an easy job as being an artist. Having the time, the money, the motivation and the space to be an artist is quite rare. So by offering residencies, by offering just general compassion, it can make a world of a difference to an artist and their journey within their practice.
So I'm also interested, Amelia, in your own work as an artist and how you visualise themes of chaos and control in mental illness. And I imagine this relates very well to your emphasis on the importance of being human-centred.
Yes, so as previously mentioned, I use my art mainly as a tool for recovery and communication and trying to visualise what certain mental health issues might look like. For example, at university, I did a performance called Obsession for Perfection. And for 5 days, it was aligning rice grains. And this was all about the control within mental health issues, in particular anorexia and eating disorders. And it was at university that I found this independence and this voice that I never knew I had. And so my art practice, again, I might not be making as much art as I would like, but it really does have a tool for conversations to be had about mental well-being, as well as other difficult conversations. I think that's why I'm drawn to the arts as well, because it's an opportunity to have these difficult conversations and sit in the uncomfortableness of it all.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I really love that phrasing, to sit in, what's uncomfortable, but nevertheless, that space can then help cultivate healing, courage, and resilience. Would you agree?
Definitely. I mean, one performance I did was at Sheffield train station, where I set up almost like a living room, and it was called Take 10. And it was literally just asking people to sit down for 10 minutes with no hierarchy in place, just generally have a conversation about how they were feeling today. And again, it was that courage and vulnerability of the audience to come and sit with me and again, sit in that awkwardness, and the human centered approach as well of just kindness. We don't have enough of it.
Yeah, sadly, that is very true. And happily, this is exactly what the art house artists like yourself, in terms of personal practice, are trying to champion, in terms of those changes in compassion and understanding, and how the arts can help us achieve that. And I think you really hit the nail on the head when you described Take 10 as not having a hierarchy, which is so clearly reflected in your human-centered approach at the art house. Amelia, I can't thank you enough for making time today. Thank you so much for sharing your personal stories and your insights with us today.
No, thank you. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you.
After talking to Damon and Amelia, I've also had the pleasure to catch up with two artists who have recently exhibited at the Art House, Tonye Ekene and Dr. Victoria Clare. Following Tonye Ekene's 2024 residency at the Art House, he has recently had a successful solo exhibition there with When the Dawn Delays, We Rise Anyway. His work raises important questions about how value is assigned and whose histories are preserved, and I'll signpost this on this episode page. Hello, Tonye, and welcome back to Can Art Save Us?
Hi, Paula. It's nice to be back. Thank you for having me, always.
Well, bless you. It's a joy to have you. And when we last spoke, you were recently back from the Venice Biennale. And you said Venice was a reinforcement that voices are valid, that representation is key, and there's power in community. And I'm interested in how the Art House has deepened and continued those values in your journey.
I think the Art House is such a special place because it's very big on community, not just community among artists, but community with the people in Wakefield and in Yorkshire at large. And just like community within like the artists' institutions. And it was such a very warm reminder of how great the institution is and the importance of art in a city or in a town. I think that house is a very special place for me. And I'm so grateful that I got to experience it once again and I get to have a show that people could connect to.
Well, I was lucky enough to come to the opening, and that was pretty much along with the whole of Wakefield. And it was just such a lovely experience because it was so clear how community is an essential part of the experience at the Art House. And that's whether you're the artist involved or whether you're somebody living locally or in the wider region. And it was impressive that the engagement with the Art House was so strong. Was that unexpected for you?
I mean, it was a new thing for me because bear in mind, I've not done any solo show outside of London before. And also, I didn't have any community outside of London. So that house was my first integration to just like the wider like Yorkshire, and seeing how receptive people were. Like, I mean, some people drove down from Doncaster, from Leeds, from Huddersfield, and which is like 20, 30 minutes away, and you have to pay a parking ticket to come. It's not like in London where you just walk down, take a tube, and like it's free. Like, there's some thought and effort to come and spend 2 hours at an exhibition of an artist you don't know. I think that was very thoughtful. Also, it just showed like the reach and the impact of what the house has been able to do, because I feel like every single person that came with an open mind. And like you said, the whole of Wakefield came there. It was so nice to like get to know people that are like around Wakefield, maybe run like the local bar or the local theater. And it was just very lovely. For some of them, it was their first time coming in. And a lot of people like came in with just like an open mind. And it was really nice. It was nice to see. There was a lady that wrote like a lovely poem. Someone spoke deeply of how just the words and one of the paintings really like reminded her of like something that she had gone through personally. And it was just a very warm environment, because generally, shout out to the people at that house, like every single person in the team are just like lovely people. And I think by extension, I feel like when you have someone that is really just lovely and great and has a warm spirit, like organize something, it just bleeds into whatever events that they do. And by chance, I was just lucky to be the artist that got to like witness this. So it was really, really beautiful. I mean, I had the mayor come down, which was funny. It was very interesting. Like, we had it featured on like the Yorkshire Post, which was lovely and nice. And I think it was very interesting because I didn't know anybody apart from like yourself and a couple of other people. But it was nice to meet new people, connect to your work. And I think that's, as an artist, you need that reminder that like your work integrates or like connects to people regardless of wherever anybody's from, because it's like a universal story that you're trying to tell. And I think that was just it was just a blessing to have. So yeah.
That's such a lovely account of that experience, because it really did stand out how strong the emotional connection was, that people could engage on a level that was personal and meaningful to them. And so I saw numerous bouquets of
Oh
flowers.
yeah.
There was a party thrown in your honor that for the rest of the night.
It's actually my first time ever getting flowers. I'm not joking. Like, it just blew me off my mind because I'd never got flowers before. So I got flowers. I got 2 bouquets of flowers. I was blushing like a little baby. I'm not gonna lie. And then having a party, like being able to throw like an afters with a local bar called Elliot, which was lovely to host. So it was so nice because if it showed that like you could also create like just a connection outside of an exhibition space. So that was lovely for them to do. And we had such a great time. Yeah.
Yeah, and it really stood out to me when I was speaking to Damon and to Amelia, how they equally had an emphasis on who you are in terms of enabling friendship and emotional connections. It was very much a shared collaboration in terms of those values of allowing art to reach out, to make connections. And it was equally very much a testimony to who you are.
It's I'll say thank you, but it's more about, I feel like it's a reflection of Damon and Amelia. They're very special people to me, and I hold them highly, and like I really love them. They know I love them every day, every time. If they didn't take a chance on me, I wouldn't be there. If they didn't take a chance on me, I wouldn't have access to experience Wakefield and what's special about Wakefield. And just also, I think that if I always say that the exhibition was a labor of love, because every single person came true for me. Like, every single person that was there really like came true. Like, Amelia was just so lovely, so sweet, and just very considerate. And Damon was just like, yeah, just embodiment of like love and energy. And Lucy, oh my God, Lucy like silently making sure that things are working out for every single person. Everybody is just lovely. And I feel like for me, it's important that we have institutions that really care about artists. Like everybody was on the day just for the exhibition. Everybody did their best to make sure that the works were going up. But like if it was getting the drinks or making things that clean, I remember like some people felt ill during that period and they still came out. I know Lucy was supposed to go on holiday and she moved her holiday back because she just recently got married. Damon had his son or daughter's birthday, and I had to move that. And I was like, they're so thoughtful because him and his husband were like preparing for like their baby's birthday. And I was so grateful for him to be around. Like Amelia also. I could go on about like every single person in the team. And I think it's something special. Like it's reinforced two things for me. One, there should be so much support for our institutions outside of London because London is not just the only place in the UK. That's one. Two, also, is just the importance of how it feels like artists by artists for artists. It just leaves a good impression for you, I think, as an artist to keep on going. Yeah, they've, not to get too emotional, but the team at that house, they're like my family and I just love them. And I'm just so grateful that I got to, yeah, just spend time and create something that they're proud of. Hopefully they're proud of. Yeah.
Yeah, and everything you said really does support how genuinely committed and collaborative the Art House team are. And something that Amelia highlighted was the Art House is human centered, and this is quite a distinction. Obviously, there are lots of places that care, of course, about the relationships they have. But the Art House is human centered at its core and it's delivered top to bottom. You notably said they took a chance on me. What do you mean by they took a chance on me? Is there something radical, if you like, that you feel they're brave enough to do, that they're not just being led by conventions of the art world, they're being led by the values that they hold?
They follow their ethos and their values to the core as much as possible. Because just a big backstory was how I got into the house at the first time was I got shortlisted for top 40 artists to watch out under the RSL competition. And then I applied to get in for an art residency as part of the perks for being a finalist. And I didn't win. I didn't make it. But Damon and Amelia were so touched by my application and they were like, oh, you know what? You didn't win, but we really loved you and love what you stand for and what your artwork speaks to. Would you mind coming for a residency for 2 weeks? And it wasn't paid, but you know what that house does? Gives you accommodation and access to facilities. And they gave like a small quota of £500 because they didn't even have the budget for it, for me to just come and experiment. And I felt like for the directors and just the people that run an organization to be so thoughtful about every single person that writes an application and be like, care about my work, that really moved me. So I jumped at it and I was so excited to come down. And when I came, like, it was a place of like healing, just to like rest. It's not pressure. It's more about, it's what do you want to make from the residency that I think that they really support as much as possible. And just learning so much about like what the house means because they're the first sanctuary of hope in the whole of the UK. They're the one of, I think, if not the only accessible space for artists and people with special needs to be able to work together. And these are things that you learn. Like, so for example, and they're very intentional about it. Like when we're doing the exhibition, the exhibition had to be free flowing because the house caters to every single person and make sure that like the exhibition was movable, enough breathable space, like just access to be able to use, like even just working in the studios, booking with the studios, there's always like a technician that is around, that is an artist that works in the house to help you. And so like when I was working on like the ceramics and sculpture, Hannah is always there to like help, like, and to make sure that like there's assistance for every single artist. You don't even feel like, it felt like you had like your personal tutor, but like you're sharing them with four other people. And yeah, it was just the mindfulness and the thoughtfulness that it's for everybody. There's a lady called Linda that does this, like, I would say like community-centered programs for asylum seekers, people that are recovering from different situations. And it's just like a lovely group of women that come together. And sometimes you see men also in the group, and we're either bead making today or we're glass painting the next day or learning about someone's practice. And you get cheeky coffee and biscuits, and it's just very warm, and you just see people come in, and it's just so lovely. Or on Saturdays, you have like families just come down and sit by the craft shop. It was such a wholesome way to see how our institutions should actually impact communities, not just by doing exhibitions, but being a space where people feel welcome from different age groups. For me, it almost like re-emphasize how I want to, as an artist, when I make it, how I want to give back and be impactful. And I think that they're doing so many things that we need more institutions like the house in Wakefield, because they're really doing something special. I tell Damon that a lot, that and Lucy, that house feels like an oasis. And I feel like we need it to be like like fresh water that just keeps flowing and flowing. And it shouldn't be rare. It should be something that is, consciously just support it as much as possible. Every artist should experience it. Yeah.
It's a wonderful testimony to the values they hold and deliver, and the inclusivity is so important and so welcome, and hence my interest in featuring the Art House, and in my opinion, as a leader and as a thought leader in terms of how the arts can be delivered and how the arts can include everybody. So Tonye, thank you so much for being part of this Art House feature to help illustrate the experience from an artist's point of view. And congratulations, of course, on your successful solo exhibition.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Of course, like it's you, but it's also you are doing the same thing what the Art House is doing. And I just feel like, we need more support for platforms like yours and the Art House to just let more artists experience, but also just have more institutional support. It's platforms and organizations and people that are really making a difference and touching lives and making the art world a bit better, setting like a bit more sunshine, and like, just making it just a wholesome space to be in, and an industry that people want to actually have a career inside. So thank you to you both, and I love you guys. Always, always, always will.
Oh, bless you. And right back at you, of course. And I'm looking forward to when our paths cross again. Thank you so much, Tonye. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Victoria Clare, who has also recently exhibited at the Art House with a groundbreaking exhibition, Sense of Sculpture. Victoria is a registered blind professional artist in contemporary sculpture. She works in the medium of wood with over 30 years of practice. Victoria has had commissions all over the world. Exhibitions have included the House of Commons in London, and she has been recognised for her outstanding contribution to public art. Sense of Sculpture invited visitors to rethink how we connect with art, with each other and the world around us by heightening our sensory and emotional experiences without the distraction of sight. Hello, Victoria, and welcome to Can Art Save Us?
Hi, Paula. How are you?
Oh, good. And I'm absolutely delighted you can join me. So thank you again for making the time.
Thank you for having me.
So firstly, congratulations, of course, on Sense of Sculpture. And for the listeners, could you share how this exhibition has been groundbreaking for visitors, but also how this reflects your personal story too?
Yeah, of course I can. So it was back in 2018 when I first put this particular concept together. At that time, it was called Blind: A Sixth Sense. And I wanted to celebrate the fact that I'd finally cracked, if you like, using my mobility cane. It was something for me with progressive sight loss that I never really wanted to use. There was a little stigma around it, a little bit of judgment, and I was a bit stuck with it really. So I finally got through that barrier and used the mobility cane and found such a profound sense of freedom and inner trust. And I wanted to articulate that in the way that I always do in terms of my artistic practice, by creating a very conceptual idea within arts and culture that could actually open up the minds and accessibility and inclusivity within arts and culture. So I set about creating 6 sculpted pieces at that time. Each piece depicted the senses, with the 6th sense trying to articulate that sense of freedom and trust within myself. I then decided to put those pieces into a completely pitch black gallery space. At this point, and still, I believe I still am the only artist that has done that in the UK. So it was quite, it was quite groundbreaking. And the outcome was astounding, to be honest. It saw such a huge footfall of people to visit. So it really got a lot of attention. And the outcomes from the visitors was, they were very, very, impressed, but also had profound experiences within that gallery space themselves. So with that, I was asked to put a proposal in to the Turner Tate in Margate, which, as you can imagine, was quite exciting for me at that time. This was back in 2019. And then, as everything happens, as you know, with proposals for mainstream galleries, it's usually about a 2-year waiting list. And COVID came along. So unfortunately, it took everything out at that time, as it did for most people, to be fair. And I wouldn't say the idea was lost. I just think it got moved on due to COVID. And it wasn't until I started working as a university lecturer up at the Greater Manchester University, which used to be known as Bolton University, as a fine arts lecturer. And I started to talk about this exhibition, which started to highlight it just in my mind initially, but also in many colleagues' minds as well. I was speaking to a colleague about it, and he suggested that I got in touch with Barbara Hepworth the Wakefield. So I did, and that is where I was then literally in touch with the wonderful Damon Jackson. And that's when he kind of said, hey, look, you know what, I love this concept. How do you feel about doing it again? And that's where it all started, really.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. What a brilliant connection to make. So, of course, this is a culmination of so many adjustments and adaptations, obviously in your personal journey, living with progressive sight loss, but also how the exhibition idea has been kept alive and evolved. And it's very much a story of courage as well as creativity. And I wondered if finding a home, if you like, in the art house was very much in relation to their willingness to adapt and to embrace courage, to do things differently.
Absolutely. I think one of the first conversations that I had with Damon, he was so positive around inclusivity, diversity, and accessibility. Those 3 things were very core in his own message, which, of course, just aligns beautifully with my own core practice and my own journey with sight loss as well. So it just felt the right place to try and enliven this wonderful exhibition once more, due to the fact that I'm doing a PhD by professional practice. This involves me kind of retrospectively looking at my own journey with sight loss, my creative practice, and also, the growth that has come through and from that. So it kind of aligns with everything about the PhD and actually the workshop that I'm working on at the moment. So I deliver a workshop that is called Developing an Enhanced Embodied Cognition using a sensory learning approach. Basically, that means I take the distraction of vision away from the students. They are blindfolded. They are asked to sit in 10 minutes contemplation before then articulating the feelings that come through from that 10 minutes of contemplation. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of unawareness, isolation, all kinds of visceral and emotional experience come to these students before they articulate it into the clay. But the point of the exercise is to show how art can be a recovery, an aid to recovery, and also help us kind of, process trauma and process what's going on in our lives and our feelings, and help us engage with the environment on a sensory level, ourselves on an understanding of an internal awareness, and each other as human beings. So that kind of was the evolving part of the exhibition in a way, which was run alongside the exhibition at the Art House as well, which was a really great opportunity for me to, get that data and that feedback from not just the exhibition, but also from the participants of the workshop.
Yeah, absolutely. And perhaps we can bring that to life a little more for the listeners in terms of Sense of Sculpture. So in the same way you helped set up that darkness, that removal of the distraction of vision with your students, visitors, of course, to Sense of Sculpture were also guided through a pitch black gallery. And I wondered if you'd like to illustrate how that worked for the listeners, but also, again, in terms of feedback, did it deepen the experience? Were there any surprises or emotional connections that people may have not otherwise encountered?
Absolutely. So if I take you on a little touch tour, if we call it that. So visitors were kind of gathered into the reception area, and no more than 4 people could go in at a time, obviously for safety reasons. They were asked if they wanted guided assistance, but it was a choice. And actually, I don't think many people wanted it. They wanted to actually go in there on their own, using their own awareness and using the kind of accessibility that we'd put in place in the gallery space. A curtain was put across a very, very thick curtain was put across the main door area, which then guided you through to a rope. There was a guide rope that you would hold in your left hand or your right hand, depending on the direction of which you're going in. So they were then asked to follow a paved, tactile paving on the floor. Now, that was also the same as Blinder Sixth Sense. So I kind of just used all of those safety features and those navigational features in the same way at the Art House. So they were then following the rope until they reached a small ribbon. They would feel the small ribbon and then realise that's where the sculpture was sitting on a plinth, and then they would touch the piece. That continued right the way around the 8 sculptures around the edge of the room, and then they was basically led out the same direction as they came in. In terms of what the feedback was like, it just was so varied. I mean, I had people that just absolutely, in all honesty, just completely lost their sense of direction, their sense of mobility. They felt unsafe to move because they couldn't see. Other people felt a connection to themselves straight away, which was quite interesting because not everybody is able to do that. So, the fact that we have people that could connect with those other senses on a quicker level, use those tactile and those sounds and those smells and those, all of the sensory embodied knowledge that we all have within us. Some people could connect to those quicker than others. I think initially we as humans, there certainly is proof that we take in information 80% through our vision, which seems crazy. And the fact that, we're so visually dominant, it was such an interesting experiment, if you like, to actually see how we could interact, with art, but with ourselves in that way without vision. And the feedback was very, very varied. I even had people literally kind of just felt suffocated to the point where they had to remove themselves from the exhibition.
This is really interesting because all of these responses, of course, are really valid because obviously on one side there can be excitement of encountering in a completely new way, where senses are elevated through touch, through feel, through smell. But at the same time, it's equally important, isn't it, to hear that actually I felt unstable or suffocated even, surprising responses, because of course this all feeds into your advocacy work. Being able to understand our experiences, whether we have sight, whether we're partially sighted, whether we're blind, for example. So how significant has this been in relation to your advocacy role and research?
In terms of my research, it's very, very pivotal, because at the end of the day, it's kind of helped me realise and actually prove a few things, to be honest. So initially, I want to explore, as a post-PhD research, the possibility and the potential of something that I would coin as blindness anthropology. So by that, what I mean is it's not just knowledge that sits within our bodies once that is transferred into doing, because once we do an action, the action becomes knowledge within itself. So blindness anthropology, I want to look at the three core principles, which is what I've coined a phrase called PEG. So we have P, which is perceive through your remaining senses. We have E, which is engage through your embodied knowledge. And then we have G, which is give meaning through your visceral and emotional responses. So those three core principles, that's how I live my life as a blind person. And I'm sure that's how many other blind people live their lives as well. And to be fair, it's quite an alternative way of being in the world, but it's actually an incredibly richer and fuller experience, because we don't have that dominance of vision to distract us, which enables us to actually engage on a much more deeper level. So I'm hoping that, the experience of the visitors and the audience have actually been able to maybe just engage in one of those, even if they've just managed to engage with one of those core principles. I think that's a building block to go forward for the future.
That's so interesting. And actually, it's a good point to share with listeners some context on Wakefield. So Wakefield, where the art house is also known as the capital city of sculpture, because it was the birthplace of Henry Moore and Barbara Hepworth, who you've mentioned, two of the 20th century's most famous sculptors. And they're both major art sites in the UK. And in different ways, Victoria, you all challenge the visual experience of sculpture. So Hepworth and Moore, we can say, challenge the traditional experience of sculpture by moving beyond representation to abstraction. And of course, you're moving beyond vision.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I must just say Henry Moore and Barbara Hepworth, most certainly. Barbara Hepworth were such important icons in my artistic journey. Their style, I love their style. It certainly helped me understood my own kind of movement as I've moved through my vision. My own style of work has become very symbolic, very form and shape based as well. So yes, that's something that's been gifted by those two wonderful artists. But I agree. I mean, initially when they started, they were great advocates of sculpture being a tactile experience. And it's a three-dimensional, beautiful way of actually engaging with work through the hands. And I guess my kind of ethos, if you like, in my research is hopefully going to sort of take that one step further and actually go beyond the hands, if you like, and use a much more whole modality within the whole of our bodies, not just to kind of understand artwork, but I think for the future to understand ourselves. Maybe, this could help in psychology, in health, in well-being. There's so many different sort of ways that this could help us as the human race that we are, because we're so distracted by vision.
Absolutely. And something else that I thought was interesting in relation to Hepworth and Moore was they were also considered pioneers in making piercings in
Yes.
sculptures.
Yes.
And I wondered again if you could help share with listeners your own use of piercings in your own work. And I was actually thinking about the Guardian piece as an example in Sense of Sculpture.
Yes. So as the years have gone on, my style has kind of taken its own form. As I said, it's very form and shape based. It's very flowing lines, very curved lines, not many straight lines, to be fair. And the piercings are quite integral to the design of the work, because I think that allows a depth and a spatial awareness when you're feeling work that you don't necessarily would expect. So again, it's intriguing to feel that and how that works into the overall design. But also I express the piercings with suspensions as well. So quite often I will suspend kind of like nylon string with a suspended piece inside it. You know, often I will use crystals, for example, amethyst and things like that, to use that sense of that internal awareness, because I think I'm quite a spiritual person anyway. So I like to get people to go beyond in many ways, you know, not just vision, but actually reach a spiritual understanding of themselves. And of course, using gemstones and crystals is quite a nice way of doing that.
Yes, beautiful. And that draws me to a quote from you where you said, "My newfound acceptance of my blindness has given me a freedom to live my life in a limitless way." How do you feel your life is limitless now? What can it teach all of us?
I think I speak of something that is part of my research, which is post-traumatic growth. The trauma of losing your sight, in terms of whether you lose it very suddenly or whether you lose it progressively, like myself, is extremely traumatic, as I'm sure you can imagine. And especially when it's progressive, because you get used to a certain amount of vision loss, you adapt to that at the time, and then the next part of the vision loss happens and you're starting all over again. So it's actually, there's a little bit of PTSD involved there,
Yeah,
as well. So
it's like being re-traumatized, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. It's been referred to as certainly falling under the umbrella of complex PTSD. But the beauty of post-traumatic growth is that having PTSD allows you to find growth. It doesn't happen for everybody, but it can happen very successfully. And part of post-traumatic growth is finding personal awareness development. It's finding resilience mainly, and strength. So those things that post-traumatic growth stand for, I would say, are the very things that I've found within my own life. And that is what makes me realise that actually I don't believe that blindness is a deficit. I think blindness has been my gift.
That's incredible, isn't it? What an important and powerful statement you can make, because of course, all of the learning and lived experience behind that. And I wonder how you feel about the series question, can art save us?
Absolutely. It saved me. You know, it was the very vessel that was always the constant for me, to be able to articulate my inner feelings, because I've not always been able to do that. And, you know, I was diagnosed with losing my sight at a very young age of 19. So it was very difficult for me to kind of get my head around what was actually happening to me and what my future even held, you know. So engaging with sculpture has been a healing process that has very much played a very big part to my growth.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for sharing your personal journey and such courageous and compassionate work that, you know, is also about enabling so many more people to not only experience art, but how we can all experience art through multiple senses and in different ways, and make important connections in new ways. And I'd also like to congratulate you that in 2024 you were awarded an honorary Doctorate of Arts from the University of Greater Manchester for your outstanding contribution to public art. Your achievements are outstanding.
Thank you. I think when that actually happened to me, it was such an honour. It really was. And, when I received the letter, literally, it was through an email, and my device read it to me and I couldn't quite believe it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, as it unfolds in your ears. How lovely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to listeners, I hope you've found both comfort and inspiration in this Art House feature, along with something that encourages you to find, create, or start asking for spaces in your own community where the arts can bring people together curiously and happily. All links will be signposted on this episode page so you can discover more. And as always, please share this free to listen series wherever you can to help make the arts all of ours.